What up? So, have you ever wondered that you may actually suck at building on Bubble and just think to yourself, like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing? And for a lot of you, it's probably because you use way too many option sets and don't know how to use them in the right location at the right time. It's trying to use, I don't know, the wrong screw to fix something. This is actually the most common mistake I see in Bubble developers is they rely too much on option sets. And that's a good segue into what actually an option set is. So an option set is just another place to store tables. And that's what a database is. And with Bubble, there's two ways to store tables. It's like through the regular database, which if we go hop onto Bubble, there's the data types page where we had a few videos here where you can store tables. And then there's the option sets way, where basically, again, it's just storing columns and rows. But the thing about option sets is they are used for a very different reason. So it's a different way of storing data. And I think the highlight is that it's much faster. It's really easily accessible. So when you're building an app, if you need to access something from an option set table, you'll get it super quickly. Have you ever been on a page that loads really slow, maybe like a government page? The data doesn't show as quickly as you need it to. Or if you're trying to load like a huge Excel table and it starts crashing your computer, it takes a while to boot up. It's because it's taking a while to access that data. Whereas option sets are extremely quick to access. And they're used for very specific reasons. And those reasons are mainly to store very light, tiny, simple tables, okay, that you need to access throughout your app in like lots and lots of different places, but you don't want to actually have to go to, I don't know, to your main database to get. I think a good analogy is like, let's say you have in your car, right? You want to store like when you go to get groceries, you want to store all your heavy stuff and all your like big bags in the trunk, right? So when you need them, when you get home, you can get them out of the trunk. They're not in your way. They're not clogging up your car, especially if you want people to come in and out. But you may want like a quick snack that goes in like the seat next to you. That's like what an option set is. It's like easy to access, easy to get a quick bite. You don't want to store your whole like grocery shopping in your seat next to you. So I don't know if that's like a good analogy, but that's a way to think about option sets. So you really don't want to store like a lot of data there because it will really slow down your page. And also another major difference between the main database and option sets is that option sets are hard coded. So what that means is that in your regular database, let's say you have a table that like has, it's for a CRM and has your contacts. Any user can update their name of the row. So anyone can edit the row details. Any user. So not just you as the developer who bought a Bubble account and created the Bubble app. It's like your goal is that have someone logs in can change their name. With option sets, you can't change the row values. They're really hard coded, which means only you as the developer decides on them once. And that's it. You can never change them unless you go into the Bubble editor, etc. But a user can't actually change them, which is just another reason why you want to make sure that you're not storing any information there. And also you can't ever change that information unless you go into the back end. So if you need to change that information multiple times a day, that's like a big no. Or if you ever think you ever will need to change the information, option sets are like the worst thing to use. So with that, I've used extremely with caution for extremely light things. And let's just go into some examples on how you would want to use option sets and what they are good for. But again, as a beginner, I've just seen so many people try to store their entire database in option sets, and it just like, it never works out. Or even if it is static content that doesn't change. For example, I've seen where it's like questionnaire with 100 questions. Somebody literally typed it into option sets. Those actually make sense to be in the main database because it's just so much data. It's going to slow down your app. And then if you do want to change it, there's actually no way to do it programmatically, which is what we want to do. We want to use like the equivalent of an Excel formula to be able to change the data, which you can't do in option set. So I'll stop there and let's just dive into what it is useful for. Let's say you're making a listing app of apartments in your city and you want to do a local apartment listing app and you want to display to the user maybe like Airbnb where you can see all the listings, or you can see just a map and be able to see all the listings in a map view. And so this is very simple, right? Option sets are the simplest. It's extremely safe, straightforward. All of them have this column that is the display. You can add columns, although I highly recommend against it. In almost no circumstance should you ever add a column to an option set, but you can if you want. But all of them have this one column, which is the display. And here we just have the list view and the map view. So in your app, we can easily switch between the list view and the map view of all the apartment listings that we want to see, right? In Airbnb, sometimes I'll go in and just look at the map to see where the listings are that I actually want, and I'll actually find them. It's a little bit more complicated because you can't actually publish people's addresses before, et cetera. But yeah, you get the essence. Maybe it's like a listing directory of businesses or something like that. So you can toggle between them. So this is a really good thing to save, right? Because it's static. It's probably never going to change. It's not like the user needs to change whether it's they need to change what view it is, but they don't need to change this actual record. They don't need to change like the name map or the name list, or it's not like we're going to have a million views. You may in a certain app, in which case option sets are not, but in like Airbnb, you can really only look at it in two ways, right? Either you see the list of listings or you can see the map view. So those never, ever change. And we're probably going to access it in the app in a simple way. So we don't really need a table. It's just static and the rows are never going to be changed by the user. It's going to be used a lot, right? You can toggle, like switch what view you want, but the actual data in the cell, right? When a user won't switch it, they won't change the data in the cell, or they won't be adding cells here. Okay, so let's look how we add this to our app. I think we're at 6. And I'm on the option sets tab. So not the data types tab, the option sets tab. And I'm going to add an option set, which is again, just a table. And it's going to say listing directory view. Cool. Now we created a table. Now you can see it looks a little different, right? But here it's pretty simple. Essentially what we have is the name. Here. Let's fix this. 6 listing. We have the name of the table, and then we have, again, an automatic column, which is display. And as you can see here, there's an automatic column that is display. And we can add new columns, which is called an attribute in option set language. So column is just an attribute. And then we have rows. Now, the difference here versus a data type is here we're not actually adding the fields. Okay, so like this isn't adding columns. This is for adding columns. This is actually adding rows. So it's adding a row in the database, which is very different than our regular data types, which is like for a content, these are columns. These aren't rows. This is like we meet in the email, there's going to be like a cell that says the email name. So that's what's very different here between option sets is you can add rows directly in, which is what I mean by it being static. Like it doesn't look like you can't get a table view of it and have users add rows. You, as the Bubble developer, add rows right here. So let's add these rows, map. So map view and list view. Wait, I made a call. Let's just say list. And these could be in like a dropdown, right? On your page, you can just have a dropdown that has these two options. And essentially they can toggle between these. So that's the first example. Let's go through some other examples. As you can see, this is very simple. If you get above 10, then there's a problem. It should go into the data types. This should be 3 to 5, no attributes, extremely simple, never changing items. So let's go into another example. Let's say you're creating a social media app and you want to differentiate between comments and posts. So the thing about creating a database for a social media app is that a comment and post are pretty much the same thing, right? Like with a comment and post, you're adding some text, you're probably adding an image, maybe you're adding a tag, but they're the same thing essentially. Like they're viewed, they look different on the front end, but in terms of what's actually stored, they're the same. The same things are stored, right? It's text. Think of Facebook or Twitter. At Twitter, it's almost like the same view. If you look at like comments, and they look the exact same. You can add a title, you can comment on stuff. Yeah. So essentially, you can differentiate between a comment and post. And this is really useful for apps that have one layer of commenting. So if you have comments on comments, this may be like not useful. But if you have just regular posts with comments, maybe it's like a news article and you want people to comment on it or something, I don't know, then this is useful. And you can just save that whether this data type is a comment post. And I'll show you in a minute that you can add the option sets as a relationship to one of your data types, right? So you would add this, like the post type, to a post data type where you're actually storing the like post text and all that info, and you would add a link to what post type it is. And that way you can keep track of what type of post it is, and you can show kind of comments and stuff on your app in like cohesive way and differentiate them. It's basically a way of differentiating data types. And that's like a good rule of thumb, like to differentiate. Let's say you want to combine like, again, post and comment into one data type. A good way to differentiate those things is through an option set, and that would be post type. So let's add post type here. So 6 post type. And let's just, again, we're adding the rows here, post. And awesome. All right. So we got post comments. And then another good example, this is maybe a little bit more straightforward, especially if you didn't understand the last two, is just exam results, right? When you add an exam, let's say to a user, you want to add whether, what their exam result status is, etc. Then you can link it to an option set that is just exam results. So very straightforward. Exam results. Again, we're just adding a table and then we're saying passed, failed. If it's a pass fail exam, obviously, you don't want to put like 100 numbers here. Again, it should be under 5. Another thing is like college application status. Another great example, for example, you have a form on your app that applicants submit their application, and then you want to change the status of that user. Option sets are great. These will probably never change, right? For 100 years, it's been in college, you've either been accepted, rejected, or waitlisted. It's not like you're going to add statuses here. Another great example of using option sets. Again, these will be attached to a data type in this case, right? You would add to the user the option set, the college application status, which would be a relationship to this option set. Again, if you don't remember relationships, you can link on a data type via a column can link to a row in a different table. And if you don't remember that, go back to the relationships video I went over. And the only difference here is instead of linking to another data type or relationship to another data type, you're linking to an option set table, which again, it's all just tables. So it's all pretty much the same thing, same logic. Okay, cool. So let's add that here. Accepted, rejected, waitlisted. Okay, so let's do application status. And this is just creating the table, not the relationships. Hopefully that's clear. Again, an attribute is a column. We're just adding rows here. Almost never want to create columns for option sets. Some of you may disagree with me, but I will hold my ground. Okay, so bring it on in the comments. Cool. So now we got application status. Now let's go to a real example with our relationship. So this is going to be an example of an app that would utilize an option set. Let's take the example of a resume AI reviewer. Okay. This is imagine an app where you can submit, like the user can say, hey, I want this type of resume for this type of company, and maybe add the job listing. And then it will generate resume generated by AI, but it will then go through another check with a professional resume writer to adapt it to make sure the AI got everything right. And maybe by the time this is published, the AIs will be so good that they will be perfect to go, but they can do the touch ups to finalize that resume. And so for that resume reviewer reviewing all those AI generated resumes, they want to do like the check. Okay. And that's where the status option set comes in. So this would be a link to the status option set. And I'll go over in a minute how we add in the data type and then the option set and link the two. Essentially, this would be the app, and you would have company A resume for this user and company B resume for a specific user, and you're the reviewer, and you can go through each resume and then change the status to like, okay, I finished this resume, this one's still in progress, not started, or this one's in progress. And that way the user and the resume reviewer can see exactly when the resume will be completed and good to go. So let's implement this in Bubble and see how it works. Okay, so first let's add the resume status. So let's add 6 resume status. I know AI is hot right now, so can do that. Let's do started, in progress, and complete or published. I don't know what we called it. Published. Cool. All right, so we have the resume status. Now let's go to the data type and really get this table of what should be a resume table. And that's what it should be called. Call it resume review. So as you can see, a tab table. Now let's create the table in as a data type, not an option set, right? We don't want to store like the actual user generated data in an option set. We actually can't do that. So it has to be in a table. So it's really only static data that we save in option sets. Let's go to the data type. Let's add 6. And let's like call this resume review. Let's just call it resume. Okay. And there's only one table in this video, so it's easy. And now we're adding columns. Okay. So in the data types, we actually add columns versus in option sets. We're straight away adding those static rows. So let's go back here and add these columns that we have. So this is a resume name, going to be a text. And then we have the for user, and it's going to be a link to the user data type. There's a default user data type. You can create a user. You always want to hit the default user data type. Okay. That's the user we're reviewing the resume for. And then what we're going to do is get the resume content. And maybe this will be a file or something, but in this case, for simplicity, I'm just going to say it's static text. It's not like we're not going to have it in a PDF format or Word format, just be text directly on the app. And so, yeah, create that. And the last thing is the status. So then we can create the status. And this will link to 6, right? Resume status, right? That's the option set we're linking to. And if you create it, what's cool about an option set is you can straight away see all the rows. And you can set a default. If you're reviewing a resume, the default is probably going to be not started, but you can set it to in progress, or published, or something like that. And you can think about this structure is very similar to how the post would happen, right? The post comment that we saw earlier, where we would just have an option set with the default post. But if it's a comment, we would change it to a comment. And then same thing with exam results. The default for an exam will be empty. When they finish the exam, it will switch to passed or failed. And college application status, again, you would have a table that would be the college application and then linked in option set, the option set we created, which is application status, and the default will be empty. But the default will be on in that case, but afterwards it will switch the application status to pending acceptance or whatever the option sets you created. So that's basically option sets. We're a bit over, but again, I would highly encourage minimize the use of option sets. Again, you want to keep it really just to static, simple, under 5. So under 5 rows for an option set. That's for sure for the option set table. And then I would also make sure that it's not something that you're ever going to change, right? And if you change it, it's once every year or something like that. Not something that you actively need to change. And also remembering that users can actually access the data in the options, in the rows of the option set. Like they can't edit it. They can see it, but they can never edit or add rows. So that is option sets. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'm excited for you noobs to learn how to use option sets well. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.